Paint this picture today. We're going to revisit this entire thing. And what Jesus is going to do, well, by the way, if you look at that, that's not the temple right there. That's the Dome of the Rock. We're looking at Muslim places right now. But it doesn't look right because the dome isn't gold, but I can make it gold. So there it is. They gold plated it, put the gold stuff on it much later, after the late 19th century. So it looks more like that today. So Jesus is going to come down from the left here. He's going to go down a little hillside, down there, go down the Kidron Valley, and then come up the Kidron Valley, and then go in through a gate that you can't see on this picture in that wall, and then come into the temple area. So that's what he's going to do today, and that's the route he takes. It would look just like that. In fact, if you go to Israel today and you go to the top of the Mount of Olives, which is all, you always do this so you can look down in Jerusalem. This very vantage right here, you can stand here and see this very thing. If you look down the face of the Mount of Olives in front of you, you'll see, as he shows right here, these walls of stone that make this path that cut down in front of the Mount of Olives. And it doesn't go straight down the Mount of Olives. It cuts down at an angle and kind of switchbacks down there. But you can see those today. And they actually built stone walls that bordered what is the most popular walking path from the top of the Mount of Olives down to the Kidron Valley and then back up. You can see that today. The last time I was there, we walked. Almost everybody walks it, and you can see it today. It's the same path, without a question. It's the same path, and the funny thing is the last time I was there, I was with a very small tour group. We fit in a van, and we decided to drive our van down that walk, which is crazy, because the walkway and the stone walls on each side. It's just barely wider than the van. As we were going down, my driver that I was with, I was in the front seat with him. He's like this, going, and I said, Yossi, we don't have to do this. Oh yeah, we got to do this. This is great fun. And we're going down between these rock walls. And I remember reaching out from the passenger side window and touching the rock wall going by. So that's how close we were on both sides. Don't do this when you go to Israel. Walk down this path, because we had to keep shooing people out of the way who barely could get up against the wall and not get smushed by the van. That was a stupid thing to do. But anyway, that's still there. And in front of you, you see down the hillside trees. What kind of trees are they? They are olive trees. They just flank that entire side. That's why it's called the Mount of Olives. So as you look from the temple side toward this direction, you'll see a ridge covered with olive trees. That's what, to this very day, some very old olive trees. Gnarled, weird-looking trunks. There's some extremely old. Some people claim they're at least 2,000 years old. I don't know if I believe that. But anyway, that's what it's covered with. Another important thing we pointed out before, since we're doing a little tourist here before we get into it, is right over here. That's the beautiful, or the Golden Gate. We've talked about that before. That's the one that legendarily is the place where the Messiah will come back into the temple. And so the Muslims in the 11th century decided they were going to keep the Messiah from coming back to the temple area by walling it up. So it's walled up. It's completely cemented in. Like, that'll stop Jesus. Yeah. And it's like that to this very day. And then their second protective measure to keep the Messiah out wasn't just walling it up, but they decided to put a graveyard in front of it. So there's a Muslim graveyard in front. You can see small parts of it to this day. Today, it covers the entire hillside here. There's a Muslim graveyard. Now, so why would that stop the Messiah? Well, because, if you touch dead bodies, you're basically unclean. So they figured if we put a whole bunch of dead bodies on that hillside, it'll keep them out like a barrier. So that's what you'll see today. You'll see a walled up gate. It's the only gate that is walled up that goes into this old city. And you'll see a Muslim graveyard here. And kind of as a counterpoint to the Muslim graveyard, as you're standing on the Mount of Olives, in this spot just to your left off the picture, you won't see olive trees. You'll see a Jewish graveyard that overlooks the old city. So anyway, that's where we're going. So Jesus comes in on the left of the picture with an entourage, comes down the very old track that goes in the face of the Mount of Olives that's bordered by these stone walls, goes down to the bottom of the Kidron Valley, comes up on the other side, finds an entry into the city that's just to the right of this picture in the wall. It's the Lion's Gate, and then comes into the temple area. That's what we're going to do today, okay? So let's remind ourselves, and I'll ask you a question. You're going to have to vote. Commit. Okay, so here's Jesus at the top, and actually as they come over the top, he's looking down over. That's the city in the background. So it's basically from the perspective of where Tiso was just standing, looking over the city of Jerusalem. And by the way, all the people in the town can see him, and he's starting his procession down the side of the Mount of Olives. Here's Tiso's view from the bottom of the Kidron Valley looking up. okay, looking up at it. And so here's the parade. There's the stone walls on each side of that path. It looks very much like that today. Very much like that today, even more than 100 years later. And this procession that comes down, they have palm fronds because they wanted to make way for the king, make way for the Lord. You pave the way before. You know, that comes out of Old Testament prophecies about making a level way for the Messiah to come in. The mountains will be made low, you know, and the valleys brought up. But this is a way of paving. So you pave it with usually your clothing. You use your heaviest outside clothing, your cloak, and lay that down. But running out of those, and you pave it with something else, so they're snatching palm branches out. And they're actually paving the way as he comes down the hillside. And there's lots of people following him. I feel like I'm doing a slideshow. This is my year in Jerusalem. So it also, Mark, since this is covered in all the Gospels, Mark 11, he says he entered Jerusalem. Well, did he enter Jerusalem on the donkey? Well, I think so. I think so. So here's Tissot's interpretation of him coming through the inside of the old city today. There's a kind of an architectural problem with this picture because when you see those arches over the ways there, that was usually built around the 11th through 12th century. That's Crusader era kind of arches. But it doesn't matter. What he did is he stood in this one part of old city of Jerusalem, Tissot did, and he saw the arch, he saw the walkway, and he imagined all these people on the left and on the right and in front of him and just proceeding through the city. By the way, too, when you see this, I can't push it back up. But when you see this, he looks very much like a king coming in to take over the place, right? It would be very presumptuous if you weren't someone important to come in like this. This is really a statement, just visibly, without question, of someone of great authority coming in. Okay, and then Mark goes on and says he went into the temple. And when he had looked around at everything, as it was already late, he went out to Bethany with the 12. So he comes all the way into the temple. The crowd's probably thinking, he's going to start the kingdom of God now. I mean, we just hailed him into town. He's come into the temple. He's going to take over everything. I mean, that was the seat of power in so many ways. He goes right to the temple, and they're thinking, boom, this is it. This is it. Let's not miss this. And then he looks around, and he leaves and goes back. Which made a lot of people curious, I think, that day. Now, Tissot doesn't have him on the donkey. You wouldn't have been able to ride the donkey in the temple area. That was against the law. So somewhere the donkey gets left behind, and here's Jesus. But accolades right up there. And this is the first picture you get from Tissot of the fact that not everybody was for Jesus coming in with great authority. Because on the left there, you've got the Pharisees saying, no, this is too crazy. This is no. And we have some really angry guys down here. I love these guys. But these people aren't praising on the left here. These people are complaining. They're dressed like Pharisees. So it was really a PR battle that went on because Jesus came in with the accolades of all these people, and they're shouting great things about him being the king. And the Pharisees are thinking, man, this is out of control. We can't control this. There's too many of them. There's not enough of us. And so there's a big populist uprising proclaiming Jesus as king. No question. And for the Pharisees, they're thinking this might be the end of our rule here. I mean, this is a gigantic power play they're thinking. Yeah. So that's what Mark does. But then he says they went out after that and went to Bethany with the 12. Well, Bethany is back on the top or the back side of the Mount of Olives. So he basically retraces his steps and goes back up there. And that's the end of the day. That's it. That's the whole Palm Sunday kind of deal. Jesus comes in to great accolades as he's very visibly seen on the face of the Mount of Olives, visibly seen by all of Jerusalem, to great exaltation on people's parts. He goes all the way into the temple, looks around. It's late in the day, turns around, goes back to the small village at the top of the other side of the Mount of Olives, and that's it. That's what happened. So let's take a look more closely at this. I kind of went over the really small. And what I want to ask you is this. If you could have been there that day, who would you have liked to have been to see this? Because I would have loved to have been there to see this. Given my right arm to see this. This would have been the greatest thing. So I would have liked to have been there, but who would have liked to have been like, you could have been the onlookers, not only ones who are on the side here on the mountain, but you get downtown and people crowded the streets, just to get a glimpse of this huge parade coming through and Jesus on the donkey. You could have been an onlooker. Maybe that's for you because it's not very participative, but you get to see a lot of stuff. Or you could have been as part of the people who came down on the mountain with him. You could have been part of the parade, you know. We have Peach Day Parade here. You can either watch the parade from the sidewalk or you can be in the parade. Would you have rather been in the parade behind Jesus? That would have been pretty cool. So far, I think I would have rather done that than be just an onlooker. Because also you get to be with them all through the entire thing. You get to see everything that's going on if you're in the parade. Although the parade might have been extremely long. We don't know how many people lined up to do this. So you could be a paraders. Or the bottom of the picture, Tissot has these guys who are hustling to get ahead of the parade because they're trying to get palm fronds out in front, get clothing out in front, get cloaks out in front. That's why you have one guy carrying palm fronds and one guy carrying cloaks. They look kind of like Scottish blankets. I don't know why. But these guys, there was a bunch of guys evidently that were hustling to stay ahead of the parade to keep putting down stuff. We need more palm fronds. We need more cloaks, you know, and they'd keep paving the way all the way into town. So you could have been with them because that would put you, if you were a preparer, that would put you in the forefront, right? But you'd be hustling around to get materials and bring them back and do all that kind of stuff. It would be a little hectic. You wouldn't really see too much that's going on but you would be at the front of the parade, which would be kind of fun to do. Or lastly, you could have been, if you chose, and I'm going to have you vote in a second which ones you'd rather be. You could have chosen to be this last group. Yeah, you could be a Pharisee and hurling abuses from the side and saying, Jesus, you need to calm down your people. They're kind of going over the top. This is too crazy. You could be a Pharisee. Okay, so now it's time to vote. You got onlookers, you got paraders, you got preparers, you've got Pharisees. Onlookers? We have 2 onlookers, 3, 4, 5 onlookers. How about paraders? Paraders. Yeah. How about the preparers, the guys that ran ahead, hustling all the stuff? Oh, yeah. Shoo, 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 shoo. Yeah, that'd be kind of fun. Paraders. Pharisees. Oh, well. Well, I didn't vote because I would rather be someone else. But I'll tell you who. Right there. I would rather be the donkey. Now, I have to admit, this is a thought that it was new to me many decades ago when I was reading a book by A.W. Tozer. And he just mentioned this in passing. And it has kind of tripped me into revisiting this idea every single year. Now, let me tell you why the donkey is a great one to be. And so to fill out the picture, we didn't read the entire passages. All 4 Gospels have something about this coming into the town. They have something in different amounts. So let's visit a few of them, and we'll fill out the picture about the donkey, and you'll see why the donkey is the choice for you, okay? All right, let's look at the donkey. So if we go up here to Zechariah, this is why the donkey had to be there. This is a prophecy, Zechariah 9:9. Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout aloud, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you. Righteous and having salvation is he. Humble, mounted on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. So that's Zechariah 9:9. The king is coming, not mounted on a great white stallion. That's what conquerors come in on. But he's coming in on an animal that's used for carrying people and goods. Yeah. In fact, it's kind of the donkeys are sort of the equivalent to our cars today. You know, if you had to haul lots of stuff, like you go to the grocery store, you got to haul a lot of stuff, you use the donkey to haul stuff. If you got to go someplace, like Mary and Joseph had to go from Nazareth down to Bethlehem, you ride on donkeys. Donkeys are the automobiles of the time. But they are not horses, because horses were always equated with military animals, military machines. Horses. And then if you take a horse and you strap it to a chariot, now you're talking war machines. So horses were always power and strength, but donkeys, they just haul stuff. That's all they do, including people. In fact, there was, I should mention this because I can't remember this exactly. In Judges, there was a judge named Yair, and he was a good judge in Judges. And it says his claim to fame was that he had 30 sons who rode on 30 donkeys. See, you don't care, but I care. It's a funny passage because Jair didn't hardly do anything in Judges. I think he's in chapter 9 or 10, somewhere around. He hardly did anything, but he did have 30 sons, and each one of them had their own car. Yeah, baby. Yeah, had their own donkeys. Okay, so this is the prophecy, and this has to happen. This has to happen. And you want to note a couple of things. Your king is coming, so he's king. And again, if a king is going to come into town, he comes in power and might. But here it says he's going to come in humble, not with power and might, but humble. He is righteous, which is interesting because that's not such a big deal with kings. They may be powerful and authoritative, but righteous? I mean, like, who cares? He's righteous and having salvation. Well, in a Jewish mind, salvation is being saved from the Romans. So this salvation from a king is a salvation that means he's going to free us from whoever is taking us over right now, right? So the king's going to come in. He's going to push those guys out. He'll save us from that occupation. Everything will be fine. However, the picture doesn't work because if he's going to push us out from some occupation from a military power, he would come in on a horse. He wouldn't come in on a donkey. And he wouldn't come in humble. He'd come in with power. So there's already a conundrum right here when you read this about how this works. Maybe we're misinterpreting what salvation means. Yeah, maybe it's not military. And to emphasize the fact he's coming in humble, he's coming in on a young male donkey, not a great white steed. Okay, so that's the prophecy. And in the four Gospels, it's quoted twice. Just so if you're reading it, the reader says, just in case you don't miss this, we're not just saying this donkey thing was kind of a crazy deal. It's actually prophesied, and so they quote the prophecy right there. We're going to come back to this at the end because there's something very important about this prophecy that we sort of miss. But that's the reason for the donkey. So let's look at Luke and get some more donkey takes. Okay? No, I need donkey stuff. Okay, Luke 19:28. He went on ahead, talking about Jesus, going up to Jerusalem. And when he drew near to Bethphage and Bethany at the mount that's called Olivet, he sent two of the disciples, saying, "Go into the village in front of you, where on entering you'll find a colt tied on which no one has ever yet sat. Untie it and bring it here." Which, of course, if you're an ethical person, you'd say, isn't that like stealing? So Jesus anticipates this, and he says, well, look, I've got this all prearranged, because if anyone asks you, why are you untying it, you'll say this, the Lord has need of it. And that'll do it. So Luke goes on and says, so those who were sent away went away and found it just as he had told them. So it's just like that. In fact, he brings it up. He actually shows us in Luke 19. As they were untying the colt, of course, its owners come out and say to him, hey. Well, I added that part. Why are you untying the colt? Why are you untying the colt? And they said, the Lord has need of it. Does this work? Yeah. And they brought it to Jesus, and throwing their cloaks on the colt, they set Jesus on it. It worked. So Jesus had somehow prearranged with the owner of the colt, which is kind of a cool deal. Notice, too, they put their cloaks, that's their outer garments, on top of the donkey. And notice, too, it doesn't say Jesus climbed on top of the donkey. It says they set him on it. I don't know what that means. I mean, I get these, since Jim has kind of a crazy sense of humor when it comes to visualizing the movie version of this, I see some of the apostles trying to lift up Jesus and take him. We need to get you on this donkey, Jesus, because it says they set, look, it says that. They set Jesus on it. I don't know what that means. But they set Jesus on it instead of him climbing on it. Okay, so everything worked. The prearrangement worked. And we have our donkey. Now, if you look at Matthew's take, we get a little bit more information. Now, since we have four Gospels and we have four takes on this event, we have more or less information. They're not in contradiction, but they do give us more information when you look at the different viewpoints. And that's very true of Matthew. Very true of Matthew. Matthew 21:1. Then Jesus sent two disciples. Okay, that's the same. And saying to them, go into the village in front of you, and immediately you will find a donkey tied and a colt with her. We went from one to two animals in Matthew's account. Untie them, bring them to me, and if anyone says anything to you, you shall say the Lord needs them, and he'll send them at once. So now in Matthew's account, we understand it's not just a single, young male donkey. We're talking about two donkeys, okay? And we learned before that the younger male donkey had never been ridden before, so kind of skittish, not used to. I mean, the first time you set a person on top of a young but strong male donkey, they're going to buck some. I don't know if they buck like horses do, but it's a training issue. You're not just going to jump on them. So here what he does is he takes the mother of the donkey and says, bring the mother as well, which may be, I don't know, some kind of calming influence. Those of you who know donkeys better than I do, I don't know, does this work? I don't know. But so now we have this very young male, strong, but male donkey and his mother come along. We have a twosome now coming down to meet Jesus up there. And there in Tissot's picture at the top of the mountain, there's two donkeys. Woo! Tissot read his Bible, and he especially read the Matthew account because none of the other accounts talk about the fact that there's two donkeys, not just one. But Jesus only rode the one, the young donkey. Okay, so there's this picture coming down the hillside. I blew it up. There's the donkey he's on, and there's another donkey over there. Hey, so that's biblical. Okay, Luke 19, he goes on. As he was drawing near, already on the way down the Mount of Olives, that's coming across the face of the Mount of Olives where everyone in Jerusalem can see him, okay? As he's drawing down the Mount of Olives, the whole multitude of his disciples began to rejoice and to praise God with a loud voice for all the mighty works that he had seen. By the way, what is the most recent mighty work that Jesus had done before he came into Jerusalem here? Mighty work. Do you remember? Lazarus, raising of Lazarus. He was dead. Now he's alive. And it says in another place that basically a lot of the people were following him at this point because of that. And because of the raising of Lazarus that had become so well communicated, so well known, so miraculous, so attested to, that the Pharisees put a hit on Lazarus. Said, we need to off this guy because he's causing us a lot of trouble. Because people are starting to say that Jesus has the power over death. So if we off the guy, we can kind of nip that in the bud. So there was a price on his head. Anyway, the mighty works that they had seen, saying, blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord. Peace in heaven, glory in the highest. Now, there are Messiah words right there. There's no doubt about that. And in another passage, they add the word Hosanna, which means save us. So that idea of salvation from the Zechariah 9 passage, they're understanding it. This guy's coming into town to save us. Well, save us from what? Well, Rome maybe. For the lower people, maybe save us from the jerks who are in religious power here, the Pharisees. Save us from something, but he's coming to save us. So Hosanna is save us. Blessed is the King, the guy. This is the guy who's more powerful than everybody there, who comes in the name of the Lord. He is appointed by God. So we're talking explicit Messiah talk right here. Explicit. He's the one who will bring peace as well, peace in heaven and glory in the highest. Now, not just peace on earth, peace in heaven, which means that the entirety of all creation and outside of creation now is somehow at peace, but at peace with who? At peace with God himself when you say peace in heaven. So this is a huge thing. And so you can imagine the Pharisees who are hanging on the edge of this procession are going, wait, that's a little over the top. You can proclaim him about him being a wonderful teacher, and we love who this guy is, whatever you want to do, but hey, you don't go all Messiah on this guy. So some of the Pharisees in the crowd said to Jesus, teacher, rebuke your disciples. They're a little out of control. They're calling you the Messiah. You need to kind of tell them, no, not today. I'm not the Messiah. No, just calm down. You've gone way over the top. You're way over the top. Just calm down. So they say to him, you need to just correct them. And of course, Jesus famously, and only in this passage, famously replies, I tell you, if these were silent, the very stones would cry out. Now, that's something I would like to see, too. Hosanna! Yeah, me too. Oh, here comes King. Well, okay, Jim's stupid. But what he's basically saying there, that what's happening in front of their very eyes has to happen by prophecy. It's got to happen for them proclaiming who this one is. Praise is going to happen that day, and there's nothing the Pharisees can do to get in the way of it. Nothing. Praise is going to happen. And there you go. The very stones would cry out. Whew. And that's the end. So let's do a little analysis for a second. That's all you're going to know about the donkey. The donkey is a young male colt, right? Young, but the word means basically not only male, but strong young male. They're the ones you put the heaviest loads on. And then you've also got his mom is with him. the other donkey that's with him. And then Jesus rides down on him all the way into Jerusalem and back in. By the way, too, I always wondered, when does the animal get back to the place where he got taken from? We don't know that. But you get a little bit of a clue when you think about the fact that before they come up to Bethany and Bethphage, which were two villages near the top of the Mount of Olives, maybe on the opposite side of the Mount of Olives from Jerusalem, two villages right there. It's as they approach those villages that Jesus sends the two guys up and says, go find me a donkey. So it's likely they come from Bethany and Bethphage. Well, it says that later in the day, they went back to where they came from, and they actually go back to Bethany. So that's where the donkey goes. So the donkey went down with them, and the donkey kind of went back with them. And he handed the reins to him and said, thanks, we're done. That's all they can figure. We don't know. But anyway, let's talk about the donkey. This is what I pray every time I look at the donkey. Lord, make me more like that donkey. In what way? Make me more like the donkey. Well, over 30 or 40 years since I first read about this, I have aspired and learned from this animal. Isn't that weird? By just what he does. And let me just show you. This is what I pray. God, make me content to carry you, not aspiring to conquer. In the sense that I'm a donkey, not a military horse. But yet, and many times in life, and sometimes in ministry too, I am discontent to just carry Jesus where I go because I'd rather go and conquer something. So the job of a donkey is to carry stuff. In this case, to carry Jesus himself. And so what I have to do in all the situations of life is to say to God, God, I'm not sure if I'm spinning my wheels. I'm not sure if I'm getting anything accomplished. I'm not sure I'm conquering any great lands for you. However, I will be content today just to carry you in the places I go. See? Be a donkey. Or, in my prayer, I ask this. Make me thankful for the mature ones that you bring alongside of me. Remember the young donkey and his mom, the older donkey, who probably had a calming influence on him? Jesus recognized that the younger donkey had a mission here, but he needed the support and encouragement of someone more mature right alongside of him. And this is one that's echoed back to me many times over the years about the fact that we're not alone when we do ministry and represent the Lord. There are people who are more mature in the Lord that God has deliberately placed alongside of you. Deliberately placed alongside of you. Now you would think for this donkey, the little donkey, if I was writing the Bible, I wouldn't have a need for his mommy donkey to be with him. Because after all, Jesus himself is riding on top of him. I mean, can't Jesus control this animal? Can't Jesus be in control? I mean, even if that donkey wants to buck, I mean, why do you need another animal? Really? But in this case, he's basically reminding us that there are people who God will actually arrange to walk alongside us for the purposes of us carrying him well. I pray this all the time, and God has fulfilled this in my life many times. I'm thankful for the mature ones. Oftentimes in our culture, someone who's an upstart who gains ability to do things, whether it's in ministry or in a job or whatever, basically wants to break free of whatever influence there is from people who came before him or the older ones that are around him, or, I could really get this done if these old folks weren't here, that kind of a thing. Where you think that I'm really hot stuff and I'm going to do this myself and I don't need that kind of support. What you need to understand is if Jesus brought along someone to calm this young and strong donkey with someone who is more mature and calming, he's going to do that for you too. And if you think that you're alone in what you're doing, you got to look around and see who's close, who's mature, who will speak words of encouragement to you, who will be wise in your midst. Yes, the Spirit of God fills you, but God also uses other people in your life to bring a calming and an encouraging effect. So look for them and thank God for them and appreciate them. Yeah. Also, it's a great privilege to witness what Jesus does in the lives of other people. And for this donkey, he had like a front row seat on watching the effect on the people of Jesus himself. I mean, can you imagine seeing all this joy bubbling out in front of you? And it starts as you're coming down the Mount of Olives and there's this great parade that's happening and you come into town and there's more people that are lining the streets. You are the one that gets the first view of all of this. So in a real sense, when you and I, through his Spirit, carry Jesus in the places we go, He does that not because he needs a donkey. He does that because he wants you to see what he's doing in the lives of others. He gives you a front row seat on the great effects of God himself in the lives of other people. Jesus could have walked into town, but he needed the donkey for prophecy reasons, right? We understand that. However, Jesus' legs weren't broken. He didn't need the animal for transportation, but he needed it for prophecy. But that animal saw things that a lot of people didn't see, and he saw all of it. So we carry Jesus in the places we go, and Jesus doesn't really need us. But he says, I want you to be here. I want you to see this. I want you to see what's going on. That's why I say it's a front row seat on the joy that comes in people's lives when they discover who Jesus is. There's nothing in my life, maybe short of the birth of my kids, but there's nothing in my life that has been more joyful than watching Jesus change hearts, right smack dab in front of me. I mean, that is just a mind blower. And he says, I'm going to write on you today. Is that okay? Oh, yeah, let's do it. Let's go. Where are we going? Well, you'll see when we get there. It's a great thing. It's a great privilege, and that's why I use that word. It's a privilege that he allows us to be part of ministry so we can see what he does in other people's lives. And the donkey had the best seat in the house for that. The best seat in the house. How about another one? I pray that I am unflinching in attacks against Jesus. So here's this donkey. He's got Jesus on his back. There might have been more attacks from the Pharisees than the one we have documented, but surely they were not agreeing with this big parade. The Pharisees were threatened by what they saw happening. There was a huge populist uprising of people supporting Jesus as king. This was a horrible threat to their power. And so I believe there was probably even more things that were hurled at Jesus than that. Now, if you were the donkey, you could misinterpret those attacks as being against you. But if you're a donkey, they're not against you. Yeah, they're against the guy on my back. Now, when we talk about Jesus in the places we go today, many people hurl abuse at you. It's happened to me on a number of occasions. And you know what? I think they're accusing me. I'm thinking they're abusing me. But as a donkey, I realize, no, they're hurling abuses at Jesus. They're not hurling abuses at me. And it changes the whole context. They're getting mad at Jesus. It looks like they're getting mad at me, but I shouldn't take it personally because after all, I'm just the carrier. I'm just the donkey. It's Jesus in me that they're actually hurling abuses at. It's much easier in this particular case when you see the donkey to understand the dynamic of this. But when you have the Spirit of God in you and someone hurls abuse at you because of who Jesus is, you got to understand they're not hurling that at you. They're hurling it at Jesus. It's just going to happen. Jesus said, get ready for it. So like this donkey, I pray that I'm unflinching when these attacks come and to realize that they're attacks on Jesus. They're not attacks on me. Okay, how about this? I pray that I do the one thing well. What? Okay, go back to the donkey. What was the donkey's job that day? Right, do the one thing well, which is just walk. Just walk. Again, it comes back to taking down the hubris of my ambitions and say, well, God, I think all I really need to do today is have you, ride on my back, your Spirit inside me, and I'll walk where I walk, and you'll glorify yourself how you glorify yourself. And my ambitions have no more high bar than just to say, where I walk and you're in me, you glorify yourself, but you glorify yourself. And it has nothing to do with how well I walk or necessarily how fast or slow I walk. For the donkey, all the donkey had to do was just walk. And believe it or not, in our lives, that's all we have to do. The Spirit of God is in you. He'll take you to places you would never probably predict. And as you walk into those places, you got to realize that like a donkey, there's someone that's on your back that you've just carried into there. And you may be the only person who brings Jesus in the context of a conversation in some people's lives. So just walk. There's also situations where you're moving into a contentious situation, like you're seeing the next steps that you're going to have to take, especially with confronting someone or something like that. But the next steps are something that you don't want to do. Have you ever been in that situation where you're saying, I know what I should do, but I'd rather not? Yeah. And Jesus says to the donkey, just put one foot in front of the other. Here we go. Instead of just balking. There's lots of cases where I would prefer not to walk into certain situations, but I know God's calling me to. and I'm just the donkey. I'll walk in and I'll carry Jesus into the situation because Jesus wants to be in the situation, but I got to put one foot in front of the other to do that. But that's all I got to do. And then from that point, what happens in those confrontations or those difficult discussions, I pray when we get there. I say, well, God, I did my part. I've walked. Now it's up to you. Take it. Let's go. And God will indeed, with his Spirit inside you, transform the circumstance because you've brought Jesus into the circumstance. You didn't just bring yourself. See, that's as a donkey what I want to remember all the time. I'll just do the one thing really well, walking, and he's with me, and he engages. I'll be his feet. Boy, this is a big one. This is a big one, especially if you do ministry where people see you. I got to be reminded all the time that I'm not the focus. Do you think the donkey thought he was the focus during that entire parade? Like, Hosanna! Oh, yeah, hi. Yeah, thanks. That's great. No, man, that's like stupid. No. I don't think the donkey had any pretensions of the fact that people were praising him. Really? He's just walking. However, in ministry, or wherever you find yourself, sometimes we think that the accolades that are coming to Jesus are coming to us instead. No, he's just riding on your back. His Spirit's in you. So don't let this all go to your head. You brought the King of Kings into the situation. All you did was have to walk. Don't take any credit after that. So I have to remind myself all the time, what I'm experiencing right now is people responding to the presence of Jesus, not to my presence. And I'm glad that God's glorified in that. I got to remind myself all the time. I got to say to myself, I'm the donkey, not the star. I'm the donkey, not the star. Jesus is the star. This one took me a couple of years to figure out. A donkey is patient for the day that he can see the face. Because the donkey was the only one in the entire day who was in the middle of all of that and never saw Jesus' face. He's always faced away. He's always faced away. And oftentimes I get in situations where emotionally I feel like, man, when is this going to end? When will things get better? How are things going to get better? Jesus, it would be nice if I could see you today. Well, for the donkey, I think, too, it would be nice if I could see who's riding on my back. But I only saw him briefly before he got set on top of me. But during the entire thing, he's the only one who can't see Jesus' face. Isn't it amazing? He's the only one that can't. He has to look forward. Can't see Jesus' face. So in ministry and how God uses us in the places we go, we have to be content with the fact that even though you can't see his face today, someday you will. Someday you will. And then it'll be remarkable. So patience for the day that I can see your face. And finally, to be delighted to know your touch today. So the donkey knew the touch of Jesus like no one else did that day. Couldn't see his face, but felt his touch intimately. And knew who was on him based on the touch. And that parallels my experience as well. Even though I can't see the face of Jesus today, that doesn't mean I don't know his touch in the presence. And that's what's radically different. Jesus is in your midst wherever you go. And he's going where you go if you just put one foot in front of the other. And you can feel his presence. You can feel his touch. You can know that he's there. You may not see his face, though, for some time. But that's okay, because I sense he's near. And that's what the donkey was as well. He sensed that Jesus was near because he touched him. He had really the lion's share of contact from a physical perspective that anybody had that day. I mean, some people might have been high-fiving him or whatever they do during the first century. So something like that. They might have been reaching at him. I don't know. We don't know if he touched people. But the donkey felt him the entire way. What an extraordinary privilege to know that kind of nearness of God in the midst of all that. Even though you can't see his face. See the frustration there? But it's not a bad consolation prize. So that's basically 3 decades of me wanting to be a donkey. and those last 2 are new this year as I was meditating on them again. And this is why I want to make a case for meditating on Scripture. This story is so darn familiar to you. You know all the aspects of this story. And as you look at this story, you think, I think I know everything there is to know about this story. So what you do when you say that to yourself, you say, God, I think I know everything. Oh, don't say that. God, I think I know most everything about this story. So I'm going to read it again. So will your Spirit, show me more. And when you do that and you slow down, and for me at least, close my eyes and let the entire scene in the narrative roll over in my eyes and see what's going on, because I just know it so well. And then I say to God, you're making me more like that donkey every day. Is there something I'm missing? And he shows me more. So I fully anticipate that next year when I look at this, there will be something else. But because I meditate on the coming of the King of Kings, on an animal who's been completely forgotten. But he's not to me, because that animal is us in ministry. Jesus rides into the needy populaces of the world, and he rides in on you. Don't let it go to your head, but be delighted he wants you to be part of that. Okay, I've got an epilogue today because I've got the time. Yeah, okay. Sorry. Here's the epilogue. Epi means on top of or over. Log means words. This is over and above the words you've just done. Epilogue. What's the epilogue? Well, I told you we'd come back to this. Zechariah 9:9. Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout aloud, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you. Righteous, having salvation is he. Humble, mounted on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. Again, there's some tension in that, because salvation shouldn't come from a humble person on a donkey. If you read the next verse, there's something quite striking in contrast. So let me read the next verse to you. That's 9:9. Here's 9:10. I will cut off the chariot from Ephraim, and the war horse from Jerusalem, and the battle bow shall be cut off, and he shall speak peace to the nations. His rule shall be from sea to sea, and from the river to the ends of the earth. Oh man, that sounds like somebody else. I mean, is the person in verse 9 the same as the person in verse 10? I mean, after all, the person in verse 9 is coming on a donkey and humble and brings salvation. The person in 10 is all about military might. I mean, everything's going to be conquered. In the end, there's going to be peace. And in fact, that second verse is what Jews really focused on at that time and even into the present to talk about the definition of the Messiah. Not the first verse, the second verse. And so what you see right here, right next to each other, is a wonderful contrast in scriptures about the coming of the Messiah first time and the coming of the Messiah the second time. Right alongside of each other. And it's clearly talking about the same person. There's just no question about that. The same person. So the first one comes humble and on a donkey that carries sacks of rice. And then the second one comes, and the result of the second one coming is that chariots no longer work, war horses are no longer there, bows and arrows are be cut off, they'll be gone. And all he does is speak peace, and it happens. Boom! Speaks peace, and it happens. And how broad will be his rule? From sea to sea, from the river to the ends of the earth. River usually means Euphrates. So here's this one who clearly in this second verse is mighty and powerful and authoritative, and in a way doesn't even need weapons of war, doesn't need a big white stallion or any kind of chariots and stuff like that. All he does is speak peace, and it happens. That's how powerful he is. Well, is this the salvation he was talking about up there? Is this the salvation from the oppressive and the injustice? Is that what he's talking about? No, and we know this. That's why this first visit by Jesus, he brings salvation. But it's not salvation from an oppressive military might like Rome. It's salvation from our sins. He will free his people from their sins. He will save them from their sins. This is all that's talked about in the coming of Jesus. Salvation for the Jews never figures in that there's a sin problem that need to be saved from. What we have is an occupation problem from a military might. Well, a day is coming in that section, that second verse right there, where Jesus will return. And by the way, where will he return to when he comes back? Well, we talked about Bethany and Bethphage, the villages at the top or the backside of the Mount of Olives. Well, if you go to Acts 1, and I think it's also in Luke, where you talk about the ascension of Jesus, but I think especially in Acts 1, there's Jesus. He says goodbye to the guys, all the disciples, and he's taken up into heaven. He's in Bethany when that happens. So just like he left the earth and was taken up into heaven from Bethany on the top of the Mount of Olives, the very same place that people first saw him from Jerusalem as the king riding on the donkey, that's how he leaves to go into heaven. And the angels say he's coming back the same way, presumably back to the top of the Mount of Olives to Bethany. Ooh. This is the same one, though, at that time. There will be judgment, and through just the speaking of his voice, all the oppressive injustice that's in the world will finally be dealt with. Finally be dealt with. That he's held off judging on for all this time. That'll finally be dealt with. And the result will be verse 10 in Zechariah 9:9. So I find this an interesting contrast between the two. I see the first coming of Jesus and the second coming of Jesus. Jesus says, I came to seek and save the lost, when he was with Zacchaeus. And then he also tells Nicodemus, I came to save, not to judge. That's the first verse. That's the first part of the Messiah's coming. And it's all around Bethany at the top of the Mount of Olives. It starts right there as he comes in. And then the second one is when he comes back and he judges all the injustice that's in the world. And he comes back, it looks like, to the same place. And comes back down from the top of Mount of Olives and enters into the temple. So there's just great reciprocity between these two, the first and second coming. But this one, he comes to save us from our sins. This one, he brings absolute justice. And so that'll be the second time he's hailed as king, when he comes back then. So are you in for being paraders or donkeys? Yeah, be a donkey. Look at the donkey. Now, when I first read this from A.W. Tozer, I can't remember which book he wrote. I'm just a great fan of his. At the end of the sections, and he just mentioned this donkey in passing. He talked about the fact that this entire story about going into Jerusalem on that great Palm Sunday, there's stars like Jesus and others in the entire thing. There's prominent figures in the narrative. But he says the donkey, he doesn't have much prominence. However, he is prominent. He's there, but he's gone. And so in his prayer at the end of his little essay about this donkey, Tozer prays something that staggered me more than anything else. He prayed to God and said, God, I want to be more like that donkey, and I want my name to be forgotten like a dream in the end of all things. I want the name of Jesus to be made large, and I want, like the donkey, I want my name to fade into the distance and forgotten like a dream for the purposes of Jesus' name being made large. And when I look at that donkey, that's what happens. That's what happens. His name is not figured prominently. We don't know anything that happened to the donkey after that. He became famous, went on world tours, wrote books. He was content, and we should be content to let the King of Kings write in us. And our names, be forgotten like a dream. Praise God. Okay, we're going to end with this song right here because it's just so appropriate to this. But let me just pray before we get there. Father, what an incredible story. Oh, I so would have liked to have been there. I so would have liked to have seen what went on, to hear the praises, to be part of the praisers. Oh, what an incredible day it would be. And yet, Lord, I console myself with the fact that somewhere in the future, not only me, but those of us who love your appearing will be cheering in once again about the coming of the King of Kings. And I'll place my hopes off for that. So I can lose my voice screaming and yelling about the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, who's come to bring justice, who's come to gather his own to himself. Yeah, that'll be the day, Lord. So if indeed the choice is of me being there in Jerusalem 2,000 years ago or at that end of time, I'll go for the end of time thing. But Lord, until that comes, I just pray you'd remind us that you've called us to be carriers of you in the places that you've placed us. That there's not really any place that we find ourselves that isn't an ordained place on your behalf that we can carry you into the center of it. So Lord, give us a sense of your presence with us. Free us from the ego of thinking that we're really hot stuff and we got something to offer here. Simply, Lord, give us contentment in walking, carrying you in the places you've ordained for us to be. You are so good to us, and you give us such great privilege in allowing us to be so close to the ministry you do in and through the lives of those who come to find you. So, Lord, I'm happy to be a donkey. Make me more like him, I pray, in Jesus' name. Amen.